dogs don't do anything in this.
We can only hear you, by the way. Like
Okay.
I know you said the rain and stuff, but
Okay.
okay, now we're live. Welcome back to one of our UX webinars where we intend to share our knowledge and also showcase some of the biggest industry. I don't like the word players, but yeah, industry players in travel. So this time we got a collaboration between the UX team at Newsoft and Marriott. And we're going to be talking about this fancy title over here called How to Drive Digital Transformation for the Hospitality Industry. It might seem like a very short title, but we'll be talking about some very interesting stuff about all the things you need to consider to make a successful product in the industry. But before we get into that, let me introduce the experts. We have Misael Leon. He's part of the UX team. He's a product designer here at Newsoft. He has worked with several companies over the years, very experienced. I'll let him do the rest of the talking. Hello, Misael.
Hey, I've been here for around 12 years or so, and really happy to come back to the webinars. Really excited about the guests that we have.
We also have Melanie Shintaku, who's a director of experience design for Marriott's mobile apps and digital guest services. She's responsible for new features, digital interaction, and visual design of Marriott's mobile apps. That's not an easy feat, but hello, Melanie.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so
Doing
much
good.
for having me here today. And thank you, Masao. I had a really good time getting to know you and your team.
Thank you for being here. And my name is Jorge Simons. I'll be your host today. I'm a content creator at Newsoft. And you're going to be hearing a lot about me on the next. No, I'm kidding. This is all UX. Uh, as you know, Misael is part of a bigger team here at Newsoft that includes business developers, UX developers, content creators, other designers, and we're just happy to give them a shout out. And also, Melanie is part of a bigger group at Marriott. She'll be talking about how huge the operation is. Brief spoiler. And let's take a time to analyze what we're going to be doing together. We're going to be talking about innovation for the mobile guests, tools for innovation through delivery, engineering user engagement. Look at that particular word, engineering, because we're going to be talking about how. Also, tracking engagement, because once your product is out there, you might want to know how it's doing. And we're going to do a few takeaways and Q&As. Just a swift reminder, you can tweet us at Newsoft or at NewsoftUX, or use the hashtag NewsofUX webinar to ask questions, and I'll be around to collect them and ask the experts. So anyway, here we go to the first big question: how to keep users engaged. And I hope Misael can actually answer this.
Yeah, to be honest, that's really difficult. It's difficult that it sounds, and it's actually a problem in the industry. Everybody that has a product out there might know this. Right now, you might be experiencing on installs, people churning from your applications, and that's a common use case. That's a common problem. Actually, 77% of active daily users will be gone after the first 3 days of install. And it gets worse because after 30 days, the churn rate might go up to 90%. That's a lot. And that's a lot of effort that go to waste if we don't know exactly what's going on at those particular days. Then it gets worse if you want more bad news. Up to 95% of active daily users will be completely gone within the next 90 days. So that means that we have a lot to do to actually understand what's going on, what's the problem that we're trying to solve before we launch anything. And after we launch the product, we need to keep track of how well it's doing. So you're not alone if you're experiencing alarming churn rates on your applications. Let's see how can we improve that. Yeah, so one of the examples that we wanted to showcase is how Marriott and Melanie has done it to solve this problem.
Yeah, so we've, as Jorge had mentioned, it is kind of a big scale that we're dealing with at Marriott. So we need to make sure we approach everything pretty methodically. So one of the first things that I did when I got to Marriott, I've been there now about 12 years as well, is to take the mindset of design and innovation, which is really more about, I would say designers are pretty comfortable. You can go to the next slide if you want. On design and innovation, so sort of taking things apart, happy to kind of break things, think of another way to do it. And in that digital space, it can be pretty rapid ways that you could approach different approaches to a problem. But when you come to a large hospitality group, their words are more centered around optimization and efficiency. So the idea of changing up what's been tested and all of the associates have been received training in, and that's a frightening prospect. So that they might just hear things that I'm saying around design that's really just sounds like disruption. And so if I don't approach it correctly, if design isn't seen as a good partner, I'm just going to hear, forget about it. We're not doing it. It's not something that we're interested in, and it will be seen as design as something you would do just for design's sake. So with that in mind, I wanted to kind of think through what are some of the barriers that we would see just to approaching the topic of innovation. And so sometimes, people are resistant just to change itself. And I think a lot of that is due to a lack of shared understanding and what is it we're both trying to do and how do we come at it? We might come at it differently, but I think we're both interested in the same thing. Additionally, I found in a large corporation, a lot of solutioning happens in silos. So we wanted to start to really first start the foundation of our partnerships at Marriott. So what we did was we formed a unique partnership between the digital design group and global operations. So the global operations team, again, takes care of about 1.2 million hotel rooms with 30 brands and about 6,000 properties worldwide. So you're dealing with all different types of brands, the way that they approach guest service, and cultural differences as well. So we had recently, I guess it was the beginning of last year, had launched the new design in our mobile app. And so what we were doing was, as well as being able to search for rooms and book, we have all these features that we refer to as guest services. So you'll get you can get information on the room that you booked. You can order things like extra towels and bathrobes, and unlock the room door with your mobile phone. So those are just some of the things that we have in the app. We are innovating all the time on other features. But to get to the point on understanding how those features would work, we really needed to understand the scale again. So with all of these digital touch points, things that we're introducing, we know that 75% of all of our guests at some point during their stay are using a digital device, a mobile device of some sort. So with that in mind, I wanted to make sure that I understood the back end of the house. So that meant working closely with global operations to sort of figure out how, from the toolkits that I have, from the tools that I have as a UXer, which would be understanding the customer's viewpoint, we have to consider the associates as well. And so again, a huge scale, we have 750,000 people that put on a Marriott name badge every day. So these people are crucial to the success of the mobile innovation that we're doing. So building upon the UX user research that was just mentioned, the direct app feedback we get from the App Store, the customer journey mapping that we do, and as usual, the user flows, we focused first as a partnership on the service design blueprints. And these are a great way to take the idea of customer journey mapping, but apply the interactions that a guest and associate have with one another and the systems that are in place to understand from the guest approaching the hotel to how they check in, to how they get to their room, and so forth. That process, their interaction with someone who is the face of the hotel, and the systems that are behind in the heart of the house that they might not see. And again, all of the other systems that are in place to help facilitate that. And then we track where we think guests and associates are both having stress points, moments of happiness and joy, that everything is working well, and where the systems could be improved. So with that foundation, now we could have sort of a more grounded conversation between global operations and the digital team. So now design is seen as more of a strategic partner. So to make this work, I'm going to just give you a real quick, simple example of a guest would has a stay, and they're invited to go ahead and check into their room. They'll make a selection from a screen that gives them pretty much it's actually all the same options that you would get if you went up to an associate at the front desk, including upgrades, things like that. So as soon as they finish checking in on the app, that information is confirmed. We pass it back to the hotel. The hotel goes through their systems and checks to make sure the room is ready. That information is provided by the hotel staff. And those systems then confirm that this person is ready and able to be checked in. We'll give them information if they got an upgrade, they get a push notification. And once they're ready to, they can go to their room and check in. This way they can bypass the front desk completely. And this helps augment the staff so they can spend more time greeting guests, helping them, and having a conversation rather than like a banking transaction. So that's kind of a really simple example of how that service blueprint comes to life. And I think on the next slide, this is the system that we use to be able to deliver the ideas and innovations we come up with. And if you're not familiar with it, Safe Agile it's agile, but where you have multiple agile teams working together to deliver on a large scale. So this is just an example of Portfolio Safe. And if you're interested in Safe, there's a lot of resources out there. I can answer questions today if you'd like, but really it's a way to make sure that all disciplines, from operations to product to IT and UX, are able to work together and deliver incrementally so that you can release things in smaller amounts, because if you try to release in bulk, you'll miss out on feedback as you go, and it's harder to kind of reverse out of solutions you've committed to now. And then the last thing I'd say is all of this to work right requires support from the top, and it has to be demonstrated support. And you really do need to find people that can thrive in this kind of collaborative environment and that are happy to collaborate and work across teams. Those people will thrive in this environment. And if you're doing it well, you'll be instilling mutual respect. I can go to the global operations meetings. I could speak for some of the things that they're doing, just like they could speak for UX at this point. So I think really other than that, Jorge, any questions or?
You say other than that as if it was something really simple, but basically the short answer would be transform your whole organization through Thrive Innovation, and that doesn't seem like an easy feat. That's quite a thing. But we'll leave the conclusions for like 5 minutes in the future, because we have another big question. Thank you so much, Melanie, for sharing this enormous operation and how you got it going. But another one of the questions the audience and I myself have is, what goes on when this product, such a big product, is out there and is making people happy, making traveling and leisure stays at hotels something cool, something exciting? Are they engaged? Will they come back? What's going to happen? And this is when Misael comes into the room again and tells us why we might be failing.
Right, exactly. As Melanie mentioned, you might have done all this strategy, all these efforts with cross collaboration among teams and global scale, but still users might not use your application. You might have done your user research and everything is understood correctly, but still the solution is not being adopted by users. Here are some quick reasons on why this might be happening. Let's go over real quick on them. Maybe the application itself is crashing, the performance is bad. Maybe it has some security issues, or the users is being concerned with security, or just because people change smartphones and they just forget to install their application again. Some other reasons are related to, users maybe just haven't formed the habit of using their application, or maybe the application isn't useful or easy, or it's not easy to use. These are common reasons, and these are well-known reasons why users are not engaging with your applications. Maybe you're not sending the right traffic to your application. Maybe you're not reminding your users enough, or maybe you are reminding them way too often and they just get tired of it. Anyway, we can summarize these engagement reasons on the 3 major areas on the next slide. Obviously, technical and performance issues. Other are issues that we can control. On the next slide, you can see that we can actually control user experience and usability, and user motivations, and the engagement strategy that you follow. On technical challenges, we might not talk about in this particular webinar, but let's address those 2 that we can, as designers and as people from operations, can tackle. The first one is that you need to do user research. Is always the foundation of UX. We can't talk about UX if you don't do user research, simply because that's it all starts from the user and the motivations that they have. And then you just need to do continuous user testing, and eventually making place some operations that you can scale and propagate this user-centric focus along the corporation.
I noticed, sorry for interrupting.
Mhm.
I'm not sorry at all because this is really interesting, but sorry for interrupting. I noticed that you and Melanie had the same exact, almost the same exact slide here, talking about user research and how to start going on. So I want to throw the ball at Melanie to tell us what's her opinion on this. Like, how can you tell someone UX and research is really important? How can you convince someone that this might be a game changer for a hotel, for travel industry as a whole?
Yeah, you can start by introducing the level setter, which is the tiebreaker has to be when you're hearing actually from your guests. And so a lot of times you might get into meetings and each person in that room will have an opinion about what things should be and what they should look like, or which the nomenclature should be. But really the thing that level sets and removes helps to start to remove ego and opinion and turn it into actual data is you'll be able to show that you can track what users are actually doing with your apps. And that also, it's kind of like a GM at a hotel. We hear directly from our customers in the App Store. So we are watching all of these different touch points. But again, if you're tracking interactions in your apps properly and robustly, you will know exactly the data, and that is the level setter for everyone to understand that these are built for the guests. And so you have to, all of us, leave our opinions out of the room.
So no opinions, just research. That's the conclusion.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. So anyway, once you've convinced everyone, then there needs to be research. What happens? Thank you, Melanie.
Right. Going back to the problem that we mentioned about the scaling design and how to make sure that the user-centric focus is propagated against the corporation, we can say that you still need to make sure that your engagement strategy is in place. And we can say that engagement can be fine-tuned and purposefully engineered to make sure that users actually use your application. Let's explore the next framework as a way to make sure engagement is in place. The first one is that you really need to understand the user's motivations, that it all comes back to user research again. Also, you need to pay laser focus on the onboarding part of the application, the first moments in which your users are going to be using your application. You need to also map the complete user journey, as Melanie explained, and tweaking behavior at particular touch points to make sure that users actually are going to want to use your application. And after you do that, you need to keep track and measure some key metrics to make sure that the strategy is working. Let's explore these 4 points in the next slides. The first one is obviously qualitative research. To understand users' motivations, you need to go out and talk to them. You can have a full set of quantitative data at your disposal, but still that's not going to tell you exactly why that problem is arising. Quantitative, we often say that it tells you the what, and qualitative research will tell you the why is going on. So you need to identify these psychological triggers at particular touch points. That's why on the travel industry, it's really important to understand how guests are feeling at different portions of the journey. We know that once guests arrive to the hotel for the first time, the most pleasant moment is actually when they got to the room for the first time. So we need to pay attention to what's going on with that. So that's the first step. Then the next step will be to pay attention to the first moments on the onboarding process. And there are a lot of techniques that you can apply for the onboarding process. There's not going to detail right now about this, but please know that you can choose particular onboarding process for your applications. You can focus on the benefits of their application and explain to users what is it that your application will make them better persons. You can focus on explaining how the application works in case it's something way too technical. Maybe we should create a webinar about this, specifically on onboarding. And the other one is just showing step-by-step how users utilize the application. Right, that's the last point. The other one is that you need to make sure to map the complete experience from the moment in which users are getting inspired where to travel until they actually travel, getting to the plane or to the transportation, and then after the post trip. That will allow you to identify key moments in which you can produce a digital solution for that particular moment in time and alleviate some of the pain points.
This is something that Melanie also, I was hearing an echo, but it's technical issues. We're back. No, I'm kidding. This is something that Melanie also mentioned, and we're seeing an example here with Misael about a flight, but we also could do the same with a hotel room or just about anything. My question is very basic, but I think it could be profound, I think, which is there one way of mapping the experience? Like in what you showcased, it was a really complicated way of understanding, not complicated, complex way of understanding. So what would be the next step? Like taking a truth serum and being honest about your operation, or what did you have to do at Marriott to start mapping that experience?
So there's a lot of different ways we do it, and it really just depends on the audience that we're speaking to. So a customer journey map can be just as simple almost as this screen to just point out the points to someone who's maybe not actually working on a project, but you need to kind of explain what portion of a person's journey we're exploring to innovate around. And others will need systems maps, and that also need to overlay. So we map everything, and they all work together. We keep a lot of master specs. We even there's this kind of misunderstanding with Agile that, oh, I don't have to document anything, it's great. No, you do. So we document everything, and it's really like a toolkit that I can kind of pull out the right map to help somebody find their way based off of the conversation that we're having. So the customer journey map is more of what is shown here, which is it's really the entire journey of the trip. The service blueprint is when the guest is more engaged on property, but all of the thoughts and emotions and feelings that Ms. has outlined here would be the entire journey map. So different maps for different people and different purposes, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And also kind of makes a conclusion in my mind that you need this not only to understand the user, but also to like break the ice with other teams and collaborate with someone, which is something that you just mentioned that drive the innovation in Marriott, and that's very interesting too.
Yeah, and not to forget that we have two users. We have the guest and we have the on-property associate. So they have to use those systems that communicate this information, and a lot of times we'll develop those as well. So those are the two that we think about. They have very different needs and very different perspectives of what's happening at a given moment. And so we research and ask for innovation from both our guests as well as our associates on property.
Nice. So it's not called user experience for nothing then.
That's right.
Start on the user and the user. Anyway, back to mapping the experience, Misael. Sorry for the interruption.
No, it's cool. It's nice that you mentioned that, because let's say that you already have your solution maybe during the inspiration or on the planning side of the journey, and this is the interesting part. If you notice that people are simply not engaging with your application on that particular moment, you need to understand exactly what's going on and then apply some behavioral economics principles. And this is really interesting. Let me show you how to do that. On the next slide, we can say that behavioral economics, I'll let you know in a bit how to apply this. But first, let's understand that behavioral economics just deals with the fact that when we make decisions, we tend to make them in a irrational way, because that's the way that we process information. So basically, by exploring human behavior exclusively through the lens of how we make decisions, we can understand how to tweak it and actually make people use that particular application because of the way that they are making decisions. So, and the way that we make decisions is using cognitive shortcuts. This means that we are not perfect, and some of those cognitive shortcuts, just give one example, is that we have a hard time delaying gratifications. So that means that whenever we are presented with an option to, let's say, grant access to an application, or maybe exploring some traveling options or flight options, we just want to get through that particular moment to get the gratification that we're looking for. So that means that at very particular moments, we need to accelerate that moment, or at least give something back to the user. So that may be the reason why they are not engaging because you're not presenting benefits right away. Let's see one example. On the next slide, you can see that at that particular moment of the interaction, you can utilize a principle. Just identify what's going on and how people make decisions at that moment. There are a lot of literature in the internet about this toolkit that is actually an actionable way to change behavior and actually make users use the application. So one example that we did by applying those principles is for this application called Allset. Basically, what they do is give you recommendations based on your profile. But we noticed that once they were doing this process of getting inspired by the applications, you needed to complete the complete profile in order to get an accurate match with your preferences. So what we did was just to break that into smaller chunks, and basically we just said, if you give me this particular data, this 5 data about you, I'm going to give you a recommendation already. No need to complete the complete profile. But if you want more accurate results, you need to complete the profile right away or in the next step. So by doing this in incremental form, we realized that we were getting users actually engaged with the applications because they were trying to get something right away from the application, right? So now that you have your strategy in place, you need to measure how well you're doing. And these are some of the metrics that you can track to make sure that your application is working and it's being utilized by users. So you need to track adoption, retention, daily use, and cost of revenue of that application. So by following this pyramid, inverted pyramid, you can pay attention to what to track next. So at the beginning, you need to track how many people are actually keeping your application installed. Then you need to track how many people are leaving. Then you need to track how many people are actually using it daily. So as you go down to the pyramid, you can actually understand how well you're doing. So the first challenge is actually keep the users with the applications in place. And Jorge, I think it's time for some takeaways.
Yep. I lost you there for a bit. I thought maybe my laptop wasn't working. But here's some of the things we've learned and would like to share with you. The one especially interesting is breaking the silos for innovation. I think this is something very exemplified by what Melanie Shintaku said about Marriott, not letting the teams work by themselves, but each other, but actually finding a way to drive them together and innovate, push through that thing. I wouldn't say that thing that everyone thinks they know, but basically opinions sometimes. The second time is always map the user journey. Both Misael and Melanie mentioned that you need to keep track of what this looks like for a user as a whole, but also it can be used as a tool to tell other team members what they're supposed to be doing or how they're supposed to be doing it, and make them come to your side and deliver the best for the user. Also, engineering engagement. I think we always say that UX and design is about inspiration, but it's also about metrics, and it's also about understanding a lot of numbers and how to purpose those into specific strategies. So engagement is not something to be measured, it's something to be measured and created. And the next step would be, or the next takeaway would be, influence behavior by understanding how it works. As Melanie said, it's not the same thing as if the user is the end user, which would be a hotel guest, or if it's one of the representatives of Marriott inside a hotel. It's different what they need and how they'll be acting in certain situations, so you can reward them specifically in the moment they need to be rewarded, maybe by a notification, maybe by a prize, maybe by something based on your loyalty system. I don't know. Yeah, it depends on your capacities. And also measure engagement over time. This is something we know very well in marketing, but it's something that might escape new companies or new products, which is the end result of sales or the end result of your product being successful depends on how much you understand what users are thinking of it and how they're interacting with it, which is basically engagement, right? So those are the 5 things I think we have learned from Misael and Melanie today. But before we say goodbye, I have a couple of questions, so you're not going away for free, not just yet. I'd say The first one is for Melanie because it mentions Marriott. Scott asks, in such a big company as Marriott, what do you think the role of a UXer is? Should they be involved in every step of the way? And it's a combo question because it says, what is the role of a UXer in innovation?
Okay, great question. Yes, from my perspective, the UXer should be involved in every step of the way, to different degrees. And that's how they are a partner in innovation. So designers, design itself can be kind of broken into three buckets, where one is design as a service, where someone comes to you, I need a logo, I need, they kind of tell you what they need, or I need a marketing placement. And then you have design as a service, which is a lot of what I shared with you today, which is service design. How do we get the products in place to help people in these types of industries? And the other one that we're moving more and more to, I think, as an industry, is design as a strategic partner. So how is design seen in the role of strategy? And the more successful products would include design right there as much of a partner as anyone else in an organization. So to do that, you need designers who really understand all facets of how to design the development end of things. They might not code everything, but they should know enough to be able to have a conversation with the dev team, to understand the business side of why things are done or not done at sometimes. And in the case of hospitality, my design team actually would go out to the properties because they need to engage with associates. They need to see and touch the back-end systems. They need to understand housekeeping's day-to-day activities. Like, everybody has to understand each other's roles. And that, again, is how you, have mutual respect instilled across teams. So it's really an evolution of how I think design has now moved more and more into a strategic partnership in many industries.
Designers to the front, I guess.
That's it. Center of the universe.
We have a question by Maris too. I don't know if anyone wants to answer it. Any of you? It says, how can we discover and identify what cognitive shortcut is being connected to lack of engagement in a specific part of the journey?
Right. Actually, you need to. I can share the toolkit, because it's actually a framework similar to design thinking, in which you have a lot of cards that exemplifies each one of the cognitive shortcuts that I was mentioning. Basically, humans are irrational beings, and our decisions are not based on the process of logical thinking, but actually on irrational thinking. So by understanding those principles, you can make sure if that applies to that particular moment that you are trying to solve. And then the same as in design thinking, you need to brainstorm to make sure that particular shortcut is going to be work around, that you're going to make that you're going to create a strategy that actually takes into account the fact that people just think in rational way. So answering the question in a short way will be just reading the complete set of these shortcuts, and as a team, identifying which might be affecting, which shortcut could be in place to prevent users from actually using the application.
I like the way you said that, because it's based. I don't. You have to mute yourself. Yeah, we're sharing the same space, so sometimes the echo might be a bit much. But anyway, what I was going to say is, I imagine someone entering a room and it's like, what is the most efficient way of using this app to unlock my room? They're not going to think that. They're just going to click something and try to get in and get some night sleep after a long flight. But anyway, we have another question here. So we're rational. It says, this is by Laura. It says, how does a service blueprint differentiate from other methods? I don't know.
Okay.
Go
so
ahead.
yeah. So it's another. I guess what's different, maybe it's the difference between that and a customer journey map is maybe what she's wondering. But again, the customer journey map, it really is, if you take the customer journey map and start to map on top of it the systems and other people that enable these things to occur, that's more of the service blueprint. So it's being able to look at these products or interactions that you have and understand all of the different sort of lines that you're crossing to deliver these things. So if you're doing a customer journey map, you're really trying to focus in on the mindset of the person and their journey. So what might they be thinking before they plan a trip? You know, what happens if they need to come back and they're changing their mind, or they saving a travel profile that they might reserve? You know, is it a family? Who's your user persona? So that's a different kind of focus, where you're really trying to get into the mindset of, in my case, someone experiencing and planning for a trip, and then how do you get them to return back and plan with you again? So that's the focus more so, I would say, of a customer journey map. But the service blueprint is really understanding the logistics and being able to deliver to the user, to a digital touch point, to really be able to deliver the feature. Does that answer the question, do you think?
I think it does, because I think it explains the logistical part, which is basically what the blueprint is all about. Not only, as you mentioned before, I think, give or take my words, but as you mentioned before, it's not only about mapping the journey to the outside, but also to the inside, like how you're actually getting into those touch points and being ready for the user to arrive there and make them feel comfortable. I have
Right.
one last question that I think can be answered by both our experts today, which is, you talked about, this is by Laura too, you talked about what people do with the app after using it. So after leaving the experience of creating an app and designing it, how do you keep your users engaged on said app?
Who is that? Is that for you, Marcel?
It's
Or-
I think you both can answer it, but
Great.
Well, what I can say, how to keep users engaged after they do the setup.
yeah, like it seems like once you did everything you have, like how do you take the next step? Because maybe all of your ideas were done in the first iteration. Let's
Right.
be devil's advocate.
That's why we were mentioning about tracking. So just make sure that people are still engaged and see what they're doing inside the application. Do they are filling the forms? They are doing the reports that you wanted them to do? Are they booking? Are they saving options for later? You need to have a view of actually what's going on there. And if some particular feature is not used and that is shown by the numbers, you go deep into that particular moment to understand why is it that they are not saving options for later.
Yeah, it can also be, to build on that, is if you consider that it's never really done, right? So we look at rolling things out small, and then that way you can, small pieces, again, that's where agile and safe is helpful. So you roll things out in very small increments and let the guests tell you at that phase what they're thinking, right? So it's not this idea of MVP, like, oh, it's awful, it's an awful experience, but it works. It's MVP where you kind of take a slice, and there's this idea of this minimal lovable product instead of viable, where you can roll something out, get some feedback on it, and know if you should continue forward, and in what way. Is it different in different regions, in different instances? So if you think of the things, your ideas and the work that you're doing, is it's never really done. It's just an ongoing kind of exploration of what it should be, what it could be, and how you could maybe even need to kind of kill it and be
Right.
okay with that, right? So it's not always keep adding. Do I need to simplify something? Do I need to take something out? And so it's this idea that things are never really done, I think.
Yes. I saw the perfect example for this. A few days ago, Confluence by Atlassian released a product update, and they actually just removed options and features. Their release was to remove features, and that was really interesting to see that a team was actually paying attention to what users are doing on the application.
Yeah, Amazon, I think they release so many, like hundreds of times. They're doing small incremental adjustments to their shopping cart, and many different features that they take care of. They're not redesigning all the time. They're tweaking constantly. So if that helps too.
So that's good news for designers. Like, you need to be everywhere, and your work is never done.
That's
No,
right.
no, I'm kidding. I said this was the last question, but we've got another one, and I think it's something we didn't touch upon enough. And this is for Melanie. This is by Sandra. It says, "What challenges does an organization need to be aware of when implementing safe?" I think it means about safe agile.
Yeah, it's a really good idea to make sure you get a coach or multiple coaches to help you through. There's because they're really part of it. Again, it comes down to the people, which is not everyone's going to thrive in an agile environment, and that's okay. But you do want to spend time to make sure that coaches are there that there's commitment from your leadership to invest in that kind of coaching. It does take a few years, I'm not going to lie. Like first, if you start out just using, you can use agile methodology without going, because SAFE, what I would say is for a really big effort. But just an agile alone, there you can see where some people aren't really comfortable with it, and I think that that's okay. There should be room for everyone to work in different ways. So not all of Marriott works in Safe Agile, but the mobile team does. So and others, work in it in different ways, or different ways they approach Agile. So I would say it's really being able to make sure you can find people who will thrive in this environment, that leadership is helping with coaching, and that the organization as a whole is really interested in making sure that you're getting teams that are not interested in working in silos. So one thing that we did too is to make sure that our measurements, our KPI, the end of our year like reviews, we have shared measurements that we're trying to reach. So my pay, my success, everything that I'm doing and seen as a professional is not just from UX. It's from my partners in global operations and IT. So that's how the leadership can support that. No, you all are going to really work across silos, and you're not going to kind of wall yourself off anymore.
I see. So once again, to our first takeaway: no silos, grouping together. No silos, grouping together, trying to push to innovation. Anyway, that was the last question. We might finally let Misael and Melanie have a break or two. So thanks everyone for tuning in. If you want to know more, you can visit ux.newsoft.com or send an email to Sandra or contact her by phone if you like it the old-fashioned way, contact with a human, not a website. You can also send us a line at ux-team@nearsoft.com. And if you'd like to get in touch, I'll leave the experts to do their own introduction. So Misael goes first just because he's first in the slide.
Right, just make sure to stay in touch with us. I can happily share that toolkit that I was mentioning about the behavioral economics. Pretty sure Melanie has some nice resources to share as well. So please stay in touch. I'll be happy to answer.
And ditto for me. So the information's there. Yeah, reach out on LinkedIn, email, and thank you again so much. This has been really enjoyable. So I appreciate the opportunity.
We had a great time. Thanks for accepting the invitation and telling us about your experience. I think we're going to remove every wall and we're going to all work together here. So we have very few walls, but it's...
Yeah. So donuts. That's actually the key,
Yeah, just coming over someone's office. Anyway, yeah. Thank you everyone for watching, and we're out. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.